A mother who lost her son to drunken driving is sharing her pain in the hope that Wisconsin adopts tougher laws. This is Austin Lockwood. He was killed in Rhinelander back in 2018 at just 23 years old. He was the passenger in a vehicle driven by a drunk driver who crashed into a tree. The driver was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Austin's mom, Sheila, is a member of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD. She was at the state capitol in Madison today speaking with lawmakers about cracking down on drunken driving.
Oh, it's so important because I never want any other family to ever experience what we've gone through. And if I can turn this pain into some sort of purpose, that's what I want to do.
MAD is fighting for several measures, including ignition interlock legislation, which would require all convicted drunken drivers to blow into a breathalyzer before their car would start. Another proposal is called Bentley's Law that would require drunk drivers to pay child support if they kill a parent or guardian.